I am going to play on Saturday, and I wish you luck in all that you do on the golf course.
It's a wonderful cause, and we hope the weather stays like it.
I wish you luck with that, and I'm very glad you did it.
Holding his head steady because the old chin weighs it down. Oh, yes, he really does.
Yeah. You can come on my programme sometime, and I'll be kind to you, you lovely people. Thank you very much, Terry. It's the only time you've ever been shut up at this time of the night, because it is some football match. Thank you. Well, indeed, it is some match with records galore hanging on the result of it. Can Liverpool, the holders, retain the European Cup, or will Juventus win it at last? Well, after a moment of hilarity with Terry Wogan and Bruce there, I'm afraid the news is very bad from Brussels. Hooliganism has struck again, and I'm afraid the scenes are as bad as anything we've seen for a long, long time. People have been stretchered off. The Liverpool supporters took on the police at one point. It's not certain whether any lives have been lost at this moment. Joe Fagan, with obviously tremendous sympathy with what was going on in his last match for Liverpool, went on the pitch and appealed to the crowd, saying, this is my last match, please behave yourselves. And it looks there as if they're getting some control of the scenes afterwards. I understood that a wall collapsed at one point, which was the origination of some of the trouble, and certainly the thing that may have caused those injuries. I'm not suggesting those injuries were caused or inflicted by crowds of either side. But you can see the police there, such typical pictures. We're extremely used to them over here. And Peter Jones, the BBC football correspondent, said probably some of the worst scenes that he has seen at a football ground, which speaks for itself. But it does seem, with the kick-off in not all that many minutes' time now, if it should take place, as if they are restoring some kind of order. Well, what an unhappy start. Graeme Souness and Terry Venables in Italy and Spain, respectively, being a little bit away from our hooliganism problem, but probably sad to see it still there, Terry.
Well, it's quite sickening. I mean, at a time when, certainly in Spain, I don't know about Italy, they have a tremendous respect now for British football. We are getting really to the front at last, after a long period of being off the scene. But when you mention this side of our game, the hooliganism, it's quite sickening to feel that people feel so bad about us all around Europe at a time when our football is becoming uppermost in our history for about 10, well, at least for 10, 20 years.
Yeah. Well, I'm afraid these events have rather overtaken what we were going to do. I was going to congratulate you first, Graeme, on last night's result for Scotland and ask you what you thought about the Joe Fagan business, but I'm afraid because of what's happened, we shall go straight now to Brussels and join John Motson.
Well, for the last 50 minutes, the Heysel Stadium in Brussels, the capital of Belgium, has been a sickening and bewildering sight. As a result, there is for certain serious injury when a wall collapsed, and maybe worse. I've seen at least 2 stretchers carried away, and the stretchers were covered from head to foot. To give you the evidence of my own eyes, the situation as I saw it, at the left end of the stadium were supporters of both Liverpool and Juventus. They were divided by 2 long poles in various sections, poles over which it was quite easy to climb, under which it was quite easy to move. And after a while, supporters of Liverpool moved into the Juventus area. For a while, there were some scuffles between the rival supporters, a great deal of the sort of threatening, animal, hate-like behavior which we've become all too accustomed to seeing at home. And then a lot of the Juventus supporters decided the time had come to move away, and they moved away with such pace and in such numbers. And in moving down towards the track that surrounds this ground here at the Heysel Stadium, a wall collapsed, and certainly there were people pinned underneath the wall. I should say it is quite a small wall of no more than about 4 feet in height, and there were a number of barriers in front of the wall and around the wall. So one can only hope that the injuries are not as serious as are being reported. There is no question there will be quite a delay before the start of the match. That's the wall I was talking about, which collapsed at the bottom of the terracing. The Juventus supporters came onto the running track and onto the pitch. We saw the riot police appear. We saw the mounted police. We saw scenes all too familiar. And I think those of us in this commentary box felt once again an embarrassment at being British. Because just to our right is the box of Rai, the Italian television company, who, like us, had come here to cover a football match between two of the great sides of Europe. And instead, their commentator was surrounded by tearful, hugely animated supporters of Juventus, complaining to him about what had happened and trying to explain to him what we were all wanting to know. How can such things go on? There are the mass ranks of Liverpool supporters who have stayed in their own area. There are still others who, it has to be said, are standing in the area provided for Juventus. We can, of course, argue that the divide between the two should have been properly policed. Indeed, one might go further and say that the supporters of one team should have been at one ground and of the other team at the other. But I have to say that up to the point of the problems, the scene here reminded me very much of Rome in 1977, a sunny, balmy evening, just a slight breeze, everybody anticipating what we thought was going to be a great game. But how things have changed in those 8 years, because then the supporters of Liverpool were full of humour and played such a great part in the success of their side. This evening, I'm afraid, some of those supporters have disgraced the name of a great club. And that once again, the minority have dragged the majority down to be despised around the football grounds of Europe. That's the Juventus end. Their end has been quiet, except for the waving of flags and the usual chants and firecrackers. What we've seen at the other end has saddened the eye and really made us feel quite wretched. It's happening all too often. Sitting alongside me, Bobby Charlton, who saw not dissimilar scenes, Bobby, in Turin when England played there in the European Championship. You said then that you felt embarrassed, or maybe that wasn't the word you used, to be British. I wonder how you feel now.
Well, Barry, I think they've explained it as well as anyone possibly could. Sitting up here at the back of the stand in comparative safety, I still felt very, very frightened indeed, as anyone would be, to see such scenes. Unfortunately, I'm afraid that some people have been killed. It would appear that way. Immediately it became known, I think, even to the Liverpool supporters, that it was really serious. They started to calm down. They also had Joe Fagan, who came out and tried to calm them down, to tell them to go back to their original positions in the ground, and they've basically done that up to a point. But there again, I think, and I'm not trying to defend what happened, but certainly the section area which was supposed to divide the Juventus and the Liverpool fans was really flimsy. It was so flimsy it was ridiculous. But nevertheless, I think that maybe, and it's a horrible thing to say, but maybe it has needed something like this to maybe make people take notice and actually do something to make sure that it doesn't happen again. I think that it's a disgrace the way people behave when they come into a football match. It is supposed to be a recreation. They're supposed to enjoy it, and I don't think for a moment it should be anything other than a sporting occasion. How do you explain it? I really don't know. I mean, you don't know the type of mentality that would perform such acts. Nevertheless, it seems to be a little quieter now than it has been, certainly over this last hour, and for all the people that have been injured or have been fatally injured, I'm afraid, it has been a disastrous night, certainly from a humanitarian point of view. I hope that the game eventually does get going, but it certainly has a shadow over it.
I have to tell you that we have a report from the Brussels police which suggests that the death toll at the moment may be 15. The police are now making efforts to clear the pitch, and Bobby's reaction, I can tell you, as some of the fans still seem to want to be embroiled in fighting, I can tell you he's had to try and find the answer to many spectators who'd come up to him in his seat in the stand alongside me to ask one of the great names of British football how he can explain it. And it is impossible to do so. I think these scenes that we're looking at, in fact, are a recording of the earlier problems. But as one does look at them, one cannot but feel that the time has come, indeed, if I can express a personal opinion, has long since passed, when we have to consider the majority. And if that means that we have to take some steps to prevent the minority coming abroad to drag the name of our country into the gutter, then we have to do it. Because it seems that nothing less than that will solve this problem. At least let us try and sort out the problem at home and not have to explain it to those abroad. We're looking there at Rick de Sadler, the commentator of BRT, the company who are producing the pictures for tonight's transmission. He is trying to explain it. People have come up and said to us, it's not normal. And it shouldn't be. But sadly, it is becoming all too normal for our national game. Juventus supporters standing calmly, for the most part, waving flags. There were one or two involved in the scuffles and scuffles. One doesn't want to apportion blame. One can only say that it has happened too often involving British supporters to be thought to be coincidence. The pitch, at long last, is actually clear. The photographers who came to capture the goalmouth incidents have had to point their cameras to the crowds, as indeed have the television cameras. It's a lovely evening, absolutely ideal for a game of football. A meeting between two sides who have been so much at the top of the tree of European football. Liverpool trying to win the European Cup for the 5th time. Juventus having never previously won it, but with a chance this evening, if the match can take place, of becoming the first side ever to win all 3 European competitions. And what a sad occasion to mark the retirement of Joe Fagan, the manager of Liverpool for the last 2 seasons, who confirmed this afternoon that because he felt that he was perhaps a little old for the job at 64, and because he felt tired, that now had come the moment to hand over to a younger man. And we are told just on that point not to think in terms of a successor, but of successors, with Kenny Dalglish very much the strong favourite to take over the role, with, one feels, a helping hand from somebody of experience in management. But very sad scenes, bewildering scenes, all too familiar scenes at the final of the European Cup. The 30th holding of this final has been marred before it starts. And from the Heysel Stadium in Brussels, let's go back to the quiet and Jimmy Hill in the studio.
Well, thank you, Barry. And if we can almost try and get our minds back to the game of football and Liverpool Football Club at the moment, may I ask, Graeme, was it a surprise to you that Joe Fagan made that decision today?
Yes, I thought he was going to give it another year. I thought at the end of next year he would have called it a day. And I've said in the book I've just written that I thought Kenny Dalglish would have a chance to get in the job. This year, I don't know, I think it might be a wee bit early for Kenny. Maybe Barry's right in saying that someone else, along with Kenny, will be doing it. But I think it's a bit early for Kenny to to be doing it himself.
You know you're about not quite the same position as Kenny, but almost. And would you think it's possible to take over a club of that size coming straight off the field?
No, I don't think so, no. I think you'd need someone alongside of him. Of course, there's Ronnie Moran and Roy Evans there who have been there a lot of years, and maybe one of those could help him, but I think they may bring someone in from the outside.
Maybe Bob Paisley could return even for a year or so.
Possibly. I think Joe has definitely had enough. If he said that's it, that's it. And I know the old boss misses it very much, but whether he could be persuaded to come back into it, I don't know. He certainly, they couldn't get anyone better than him to help Kenny on his way, could they?
Terry, you've been mentioned with most of the clubs in Europe. They haven't linked you yet with Liverpool?
No, they haven't, Jim, no.
No possibilities there, of course?
No.
What do you think about a player like Kenny coming off the field and doing a job like that as a manager?
I think personally it's too difficult at the very top end of the game. I think that if you're going to make mistakes, I think you should make them a little lower down where it's not going to be so expensive. And I think you've got to learn your trade in anything you do in life, and I think football management is no exception.
Well, let's turn to tonight's game, which was so sad because it was quite sparkling here. We were all looking forward to it very much indeed. Differences of opinion. You were leaning towards Juventus, were you not?
Yes, I was. I've just felt that, it's, as I said Saturday, it's the individualism of Juventus against the great, which I feel, great teamwork of Liverpool. The only thing is that I think the teamwork of Liverpool is so advanced and so modern, and playing against a sweeper system for a year now, I think that it certainly has weaknesses. And I think if anybody's going to find those weaknesses, it's going to be Liverpool. At the same time, we have 3 or 4 world-class players, individual players, and it depends whether those individual players function on the night or not. I just hope that whoever wins, it's going to be football, because I've seen a couple of, which I feel, to be fair, disappointing games recently, and I want to watch a game and afterwards I want to remember some lovely dribbles or some good passes or some good shooting. I want to remember something lovely about the game. And with the people that's involved tonight, we're full of that expectancy, and we obviously, I think everybody hopes tonight that we're going to see that.
Well, we shall keep keeping everybody up to date, of course, when there is a possibility of a kick-off. But the case for Liverpool, Graeme, which is your side?
Yes, I think Liverpool will win because they'll have so much of the ball tonight. I think Juventus, with their sweeper system, will sit back and try and catch Liverpool on the break, as they did in the Super Cup. And remember, the Super Cup was played in Turin. I think you'll see Liverpool a lot of the ball tonight because, as Terry said, they're second to no one when it comes to teamwork. You know, they're passing, it looks a good surface, and I just feel that Liverpool will have that much of the ball tonight. Sooner or later they're going to get a goal. My only fear is that, a great deal's made of Platini about the goals he scores, but if you look at the goals he's created and the passes he's made in the previous rounds of the European Cup, he really has got Juventus into the final of the European Cup. And I would have been a lot happier if Briaschi for Juventus hadn't been playing. I think he's an excellent player, and he'll play down the left-hand side, which is up against Phil Neal, and Phil Neal is maybe not as quick as...
Well, I must interrupt. I'm sorry to interrupt you, but there is some news from Brussels at the moment, and I understand that the match may not even take place. Barry Davies.
Well, still the struggle here at the Heysel Stadium continues to get the situation in order so that we can watch a game of football. That's the terrace at the left end, which an hour or more ago was occupied by supporters of Juventus, with the main Liverpool body to the right. Down in front now the main stand and the home straight of stadium, famous of course also for athletics as well as for football. They hold the Ivo van Dam Memorial meeting here. And talking of meetings at this precise moment, UEFA, who are responsible of course for all the European competitions, are meeting to decide what to do. We hear that paratroopers from the Belgian army have been sent for. The figure of those who are feared to have died is still at 15, and it appears that the idea of bringing in members of the army is because obviously the spectators at the Juventus end are not aware indeed that there have been any fatalities, and obviously we don't know either whether the fatalities are from those who've travelled out from England or those who've made their way from Italy, or indeed those who gained tickets in this capital. Officially there were 14,500 tickets for each club, and the crowd limited to 52,000 here in the stadium. But they're the majority, and let us stress this point, the majority of Liverpool supporters standing quite calmly, coming to support their team on its way to winning the European Cup for the 5th time. But they, like we, wait to see the outcome, hear the outcome rather, of the UEFA meeting. So back to you, Jim.
Well, we don't know quite what the answer is going to be from Brussels, but meantime, let's have news from John Humphreys.
Well, the latest from the police in Brussels is that at least 15 people have been killed there and at least 100 people have been injured, some of them seriously. And as you'll have been seeing, the trouble is still going on. It appears to have begun an hour before kick-off when Liverpool fans broke out of their segregated area of the stadium and moved into the area occupied by Juventus fans. Scuffles and fighting began, and it's reported the Juventus fans did try to move away, but a wall collapsed and caused some of the injuries. At one stage, about 6,000 people were on the pitch. And I've just been given another piece of copy from the Reuters news agency, which says at least 28 fans have been killed altogether so far. So clearly it's the worst incident of its kind that's been seen in European football. Now back to Jimmy Hill.
Thank you, John. Well, the question I'm going to put to Graeme and Terry is, do you think the match should take place in the circumstances? Graeme?
No, I don't think so. I think it's a very sad day for football. I feel for the parents who'll be maybe watching this programme, wondering if it's any of their kids who are involved in it. I think maybe we've seen the last English team playing a European competition for a long, long time, Jim.
Those consequences could be very serious, I mean, for football, for English football, Terry. Can you see your way for, I understand they're meeting at the moment, that's what we've heard, yes, to decide about the match, but there's no question that other meetings will take place once this is over, maybe deciding whether they'll have any British teams in Europe ever again, would you say?
I fear the worst now. I think that is over the top. I think that we've let it go and something should have been done a lot earlier. And that's very, very simple to say now. But nevertheless, it should have done. We've all criticised and we've all... I suppose really the main problem is that no one's really come up with the answer. And I think the answer is, personally, is that the fear subject...
There are the pictures now. You see, it's still going on. I mean, it just doesn't abate. Throwing stones, just the same kind of appalling action that we saw. You remember Luton and Millwall? You wouldn't have seen that.
No, I haven't seen that, no.
No, yeah, the police seeming powerless to stop it, and as if they have some kind of... they want to inflict punishment on football.
It doesn't happen anywhere else in Europe. Okay, it happens elsewhere in Europe, but not on a regular basis, not to the same extent as we have it here.
Do you think that's because the police are more severe? Terry, in Spain, you were saying that.
They're just frightened out of their life. They just can't do it. And if there was just one incident, it's nipped in the bud, you see, but we've not nipped it in the bud, and it's got bigger, until, as what we're talking about, it's got completely out of control. And now it is a hell of a problem to solve it.
Yeah.
But it's the fear factor is the thing. Anywhere in Europe, they're frightened out of the life of the police. And the police hands seem to be tied here.
Yeah. Are the police as severe in Italy?
Yeah, I mean, there's no... It's the same situation. If they do it, I mean, there's the Juventus players on the track. They just nip it in the bud. I mean, there's no... If someone steps out of line, they get punished right away.
Yeah. And they're too frightened to do it again.
It looks
that's Cabrini.
Yeah, that's Cabrini. And it looks as if the Juventus players are appealing to the fans to just calm down and enable them to get the match played, because one wonders what would happen now if the match was put off, because then you have another problem. The people having travelled all that way.
I think the fact that they've sent for paratroopers suggests that they're, I mean, to me anyway, maybe they're not going to play it. I mean, maybe they're going to try and keep one set of supporters in the ground, let the other go home. But you're going to have the same problem in the city tonight, when they play it or if they don't play it. After the game, both sets of supporters are going to be in the city after the game.
So it is virtually an impossible situation, really, for anybody to decide what is the right course of action. In fact, whatever is done is going to appear to be wrong.
That's right.
The Red Cross at the stadium say that 30 killed and 100 are seriously injured in hospital. With so much trouble, it doesn't seem feasible, really, for players to come out and play a game in that atmosphere.
It's a game of football.
I mean, Graham's just saying about parents worrying if their sons are okay. It's almost like you're talking about them going off to war.
I mean, that's what's come to them when our teams go to Europe now. But once again, it's a minority, and so many innocent people get caught up in it.
I think Barry Davies played it very well. It's a severe embarrassment for everyone, and now it's gone beyond that. It's a tragic. Now it's tragic. Now it's tragic.
Would you recommend, I mean, I know it would mean a change of law, and so many of these things do depend on the way the government reacts to it, the taking away of passports in circumstances like this of people who have been proved to be guilty?
I'd like to do more than that, Jim. I think I just feel absolutely...
But that step hasn't even been taken. I mean, those that came back from Finland, was it, were suspended from 5 years for going to Finland, which is not very much of a punishment, is it, in those circumstances? Although 100 were put in jail over there. That was the last time out. Do you think the passport thing could be a deterrent?
But you're talking about, now we're talking about people being killed tonight. Now we've got to say beforehand that if people are going to get caught for doing that, and we've got video cameras, we can catch them, the mother can't say my Jimmy wouldn't do it, because we can say, look, your Jimmy's just beaten hell out of little Johnny there, and it's on the, and he's got to go away for 10 years or whatever. That's going to stop them. They won't do it again, and it's fear is the key. You've got to frighten them, because now we're talking about passports if it was nipping it in the bud. We're now talking about a severe major problem, and it is quite sickening, obviously, to everybody that's watching these pictures here this evening.
Well, I always felt that they continue to do it because they get away with it unpunished, and the Cambridge justice seemed to be the first time really that they were really dealt with in a severe way.
Then again, people were shocked by that.
The fact that they were punished so severely.
But there's no fear in anything hardly, is there? They're not frightened of the policemen anymore. And I feel sorry for the policemen in some respects. They don't get a chance to sort it out, and it's got to be sorted out.
I mean, the police catch them. They're doing the job, and then they go to court, and then you get these magistrates give them 25 quid fines.
Exactly.
So you would like to see the sort of punishment
severe as it can possibly be. It can't be severe enough, because that now is past anything else I've ever seen. And I haven't got the words to explain how I feel tonight, and I'm sure everybody feels the same.
We came here to talk about a game of football.
Yeah, we kept talking about lovely things about the game, and all of a sudden we're faced with this terrible thing.
It's taking some people's lives away from them and destroying the livelihood of others, because it's your profession, in a way, and it's the profession of a lot of people in this country.
People say, well, it's easy for Terry and I to talk about English teams or British teams being banned from Europe because we're no longer involved with British teams. But I see that as the only answer. I mean, and the way the game is in England today, the team just can't afford to do without European football because there's so much money involved. But I think that's what it's going to come to, Jimmy. I can't see another way out of it.
In fact, through being out of England, you probably see it in some ways more clearly. You get it in perspective.
Terry's in Spain, I'm in Italy. I mean, there's no one. They're fanatics the same as our supporters are. I mean, in a different way. They're more inclined to outshout each other or have a bigger flag than other supporters. They don't want to be tearing each other's heads off like our supporters seem to want to do.
They have announced, that is the announcement saying that the game will commence, but we're not sure at what time it will commence. I think what they're going to do is to get absolute control of the crowd and then attempt to play the match. But it is an awful task to try and turn your mind back to a game of football. I find it so, sitting here.
Well, it's just we're all shocked, and we might be saying the right things or the wrong things. There's people out there have got to make fast decisions who are not really perhaps ready for, even though you should always when there's a British team involved. And yet, as you said earlier, whatever decision they make now is going to be wrong, because Graeme says they're going to worry about what's going to happen in the city. In a beautiful place like Brussels, they're going to be terrified.
See, you wonder what the response will be when the supporters, and sooner or later, before the game finishes, they'll find out that people have died. Now you wonder what's going to happen then. I mean, they can go one of two ways. They can even become more hostile and more violent, or they take the correct way out and behave like human beings. I mean, that's open for argument again.
Quite a few people suggest that it's sometimes the fault of players on the field, but of course this match hasn't started. But it does put an enormous amount of pressure on those players if the game does start. They've got to compete. They weren't going out there in gentle fashion to win this match, either of them, you know, and neither should they really at this stage of the competition.
That's
so
right.
they're under extra pressure now, Terry.
Yes, they are. It'd be interesting to know what would you say, Graeme, that Joe Fagan, knowing the sort of bloke he was, what would he be saying now to the team?
Well, I think they'll try and keep the fact that people have died away from them, because I know the lads, and that would worry them. I'm not saying that because they're friends of mine, but I know it would worry them. I'm sure it would worry the Juventus players as well. So they'll be trying to keep that away from them. The dressing room, they'll be laughing and joking in there. But, it's just taking so much away from the game.
I'm sure if we find it difficult to talk about it over those pictures because of shame and sadness and all kind of other emotions, a player would find it extremely difficult to produce his best under those conditions.
He certainly would feel that before the game starts. I think once the game starts, I think that you'd get into the game and they'd be worried again about it afterwards. But I think once the game goes, you'll see a game very close to what we would have seen normally. But as
Well,
also
so.
bearing in mind that Graeme said that they might keep this information away from the teams anyway.
Yeah. It doesn't seem, and I think we should make this clear, that the injuries and deaths were a result of direct fighting, but of the wall collapsing.
Well, we don't know, do we?
No, we don't know, but it does seem that. But of course it is the aggression that brings about a situation where a wall does collapse.
That's right.
Well, let's go back to Brussels and get an up-to-date report now from Barry Davies.
Well, Jimmy, we're seeing pictures of the start of the whole problem. These are recorded pictures as some Liverpool supporters moved into the Juventus area. You can see the Juventus supporters trying to get over the wall to our right. Some of them are moving away at the top of the picture and down towards the running track. And it was the pressure of movement down towards the running track which resulted in the wall giving way and people being pinned underneath it. Just look at one or two of these faces. They're faces of fear, frightened people who just don't understand what has happened. And really, there's such an overwhelming feeling here, sitting in the stand, watching these pictures from earlier, looking at the stadium now, a feeling of total helplessness, a feeling of sympathy for those who've been killed and injured, a sympathy for people who love to watch their sport, a sympathy for the game of football, which was one of those things to unite people, which is now in an extraordinary way become amongst a minority, some sort of substitute for war. That people go to watch football matches to defend their ground, to stand up for their team. I mean, I heard Jimmy refer earlier to the Luton Millwall situation. That was all the results of territory being defended and of what had happened at another London ground a few weeks earlier. It had nothing to do with the cup tie itself, I don't believe, at Luton. And this is just a scene of total mayhem that resulted from people deciding that it was important to them to invade the opposition territory. And as a result of that attitude, that anger, that demand to be seen to be the tough guys, and whatever you want to call them, 28 people, we're now told, are dead, and many others are injured and being taken to hospital, and presumably some of those injured are in a serious state. We've been told that the match will go on, and I really don't think UEFA had any other choice. I mean, there are people waiting in this ground, and the one thing that can take away the mind, if only briefly, from the incidents that we've seen, from the injured and the overwhelming sympathy, as I said, for those who have died. For the moment, at least, football will, we hope, become a unifying bond. And there is an enormous responsibility on the players now, if they possibly can, to put it out of their minds and to make it an attractive game and to try and show that they believe, as the majority believe, that football is one of the most beautiful and simple games, and has been all around the world. And now suddenly it's been besmirched because of an attitude which a decade and more ago was totally foreign to the British character, but which now has grown until it is a cancer on society. These are still recordings of the scenes earlier, and looking down at the wall that gave way, the people who sought refuge in the only place they could go to, which in the present climate of debate at home, it should once again be said that the fact that there were fences that could be got through and people got onto the pitch, that perhaps saved even greater injury. Still, the policemen on horseback are on the main running track. Let me emphasize again, this is not a continuing battle. These are pictures that we are seeing, recorded pictures of the incidents which led to the trouble and the result of that trouble. At one end of the ground, as I look now, we have mounted police. On the home straight by the stand, we have mounted police, but in riot uniform. And one has to say that the policemen at the Juventus end are conspicuous by their absence. It's a lovely, lovely still summer's evening, but one which will be remembered for all the wrong reasons and by those whose family has suffered from it. It will be an evening that will never be forgotten. There will be people here who will never go and watch a football match again, and there will be people watching these scenes who will say, I don't want to go and watch a football match. But it is not football's problem. Football is the scene which has been used because it is such a popular and the national game. Photographers still getting their shots. It's a sad story, Jim, but I just hope that we will have a football match here shortly, and it does seem as though, as every second goes by, the chances of that are improving.
Well, thank you, Barry. Really, we've just been talking while we've been listening to you here, and one of the things that's different in Spain and Italy and Great Britain is that there is national service in Spain and Italy. I don't know whether you would feel that that is almost a must now in this country.
There's players I play with. One of them last year had to leave the club for a bit and go and do his stint somewhere down south. I mean, I think, not that I know a great deal about national service, but I don't think it would harm the sort of people that you're seeing on the television tonight.
Terry, would you advocate that, among other things?
I have for a long time, because I think that it does give you some sort of manners and responsibility, and it does knock you into shape. In the same in our club, all our players have to do their year's service, and it's not a case of us saying what we do or what they do. It's there, and it's something that we can learn from, and because we have got the problem here. And as I said, it's one thing the Europeans have always felt about the British people, that they can behave themselves. And now it's just the opposite. You know, as I said earlier, they think the football's great, but the people, and we all get branded by this minority. And it's an organised minority as well.
As much as you see that tonight, there'll be thousands upon thousands of Italians and Liverpudlians on the other side of the ground, arms around each other, sharing their drinks, sharing their food. As Terry said, it's a minority. It's a shame you just can't pick those out.
I always felt that about the England-Scotland game, because Scots are very welcome in England. A lot of you live here, and have done. And I think there's a great affection for the Scots. And what a lovely weekend that Wembley match could be. And if they came down in peace, when they did come, I think Londoners would give them a warm welcome. And as you say, share a glass of wine or a bottle of beer or something, and make it a lovely sporting occasion. But I'm afraid we're well past that. And the sort of things that we've seen here today. It's very interesting, because it does seem from the papers that now the government and the FA seem to be falling out. So we're even having argument as to what kind of means could be made to bring it under control. What line do you take on that? It seems that the government are saying it's football's problem, you should do something about it.
I think that if it's inside the ground, it's got to be organised. I think that we're saying if it's inside the ground, it's the club's. It's its club's job to sort of protect that club and keep the walls and so forth as well as it can. But when it actually comes to the behaviour, That's got to be done to the government, in my opinion. And then if, as Graeme was saying, if the police catch these people and put them into courts, then we've got to do our job by giving them as severe punishment as we can to see that it doesn't happen again. By not stopping it, we're encouraging it.
Yeah. But a government's got to be single-minded about it and not just play games, has it?
Well, the government's got to actually be very single-minded and got to think about the good of the people and the name of the country, not worrying about when it's going to win votes or not. That's what we've got to be concerned about. And once we've got to say, never mind that, this is a severe problem, and let's really make it, warn them in advance, and if they do it, 10 years, whatever it is, I'm sorry, because I feel very, very strong about it, because everybody's suffering. And what's more is the people that are going to watch the games is the worst thing, because it belongs to the people of Europe. It's their favourite game. They're people that have loved from children, generations, and you do see in Barcelona, the little boy and his father and his grandfather all going to the game hand in hand, 3 generations of people, 120,000 people with not a problem. And that comes from fear, because they're frightened to step out of line.
Now, if the government did accept what you're saying, let's take action and make sure that, as you say, a grandfather and a father and a son can go to a game again over here. What things would you recommend? What things have to be done by the government?
We've got to deal with the troublemakers first, because the people are not going to start, well, for a long time, not come to football, and that is one of the main reasons why they
Proper
don't come.
punishment to start with.
Proper punishment is the number one priority.
Without a doubt. I mean, if
Cut away, just
if you
cut
sort,
that
if you
cancer
sort
away.
that out, then you're going to get families coming back to football. In Italy, I don't know what percentage of the crowds are females in this country, but you come to any game in Italy, and off the top of my head, it'd be something like 25% of the crowd would be women.
Right,
girls.
proper punishment is one thing. National service we've talked about, and I think we'd all agree on at some stage. Now, what about when it happens abroad, as has happened here?
Well, I think it's a mistake playing it in a city like Brussels. I think if English teams are going to be involved in finals again, I think you're going to have to take them to cities where they can handle that sort of problem, i.e. Barcelona, Madrid, places in Italy as well. I mean, and these guys who are causing the trouble tonight, you don't think they would step out of line in these cities, because the policemen are just going to come along with their batons and hit them with them.
So, in other words, what you're saying is, for want of a word, more brutal action by the police, if it's called for.
But you're not talking about human beings here, you're talking about animals. I mean, the way they go on, they act like animals, so they should be treated like animals.
Do you go with that, Terry?
Yeah, well, I think that the time's come where it's got to be stopped. And firstly, I would put them away. I would, because I don't like. The only thing that worries me is that then people go around battering people that haven't caused the problem. Then the innocent one can be done. But when we see them on the video, we see them on the tape actually starting it. Gotcha, you're in. Bye bye. Sorry. And I tell you what, they won't do it anymore. All the time. I'm sorry to keep on about all the time that they think they're going to get away. They'll do it. I've read articles this year. We get the paper a day late or whatever. And I remember seeing that a boy saying, well, I do it because I know nothing's going to happen. I know nothing's going to happen to me.
Well, bear in mind this is a government that's very strong on law and order, and it must be embarrassing to say the least that in this particular area they are failing. But I have a feeling in my own mind is that they don't realise the size of the problem to eradicate it. Would you say that?
Yes, I know. I mean, it's a great problem. I know, because I know that if they could have done something about it earlier, they would have done. But I still think there's political issues involved while we've not got on top of it a lot quicker.
National service is unpopular, doesn't win you votes, does it?
No. No, it doesn't.
The prisons are overcrowded anyway, so
and you've
where
got
do
to
you...
you've got to give the young lads anyway. The young lads have got to have something to be proud of. And I think that in some ways you can be proud of having a uniform, or you can doing something a bit more, because they've just got nothing to do. And then the people, the strong influences that organise these, take these stray people that have got nothing to do, and they organise them into... That is organised tonight.
Well,
because I tell you what, Liverpool, I can't remember. I don't know. Graeme would know better. I can't remember that's happened with Liverpool.
That's ironic. I mean,
they've been great supporters, and credit to the game for years and years. That is a surprise to me.
It's rather extraordinary. You know, so quickly after the other happenings recently, which have disgraced us. It's worth, I think, going back to the ground just to get an up-to-date report from Bobby Charlton and Barry Davies.
Yes, well, if I can just join in there, and I agree 100% with what Terry says. I don't think for a moment that they'll bring back national service, certainly. But I do feel that youngsters these days have to be frightened of something. They have to respect something. If you fine them, they don't seem to be able to pay the fines and they share it. If you put them in jail or a detention centre, they don't appear to be any worse off than some of them were before anyway. But I think that the only thing that you have to do is to try and actually implant in the minds before they even think about it, that it's not going to be worth doing it because the punishment is too harsh. There's lots and lots of people, myself included, think that a form of corporal punishment should come back because that is the one thing that you can't pass on to anyone else. When you see all these young lads that are just completely undisciplined, they just lose all sense of direction and discipline altogether, then it makes you think then somewhere along the line they have to be afraid of something, so that if they do it, that they're going to think twice. I do think that it's a tragedy, this, for our game, and I do think, like Terry, you know, that the government have to take the bull by the horns, and they have to make some proper legislation to make sure that the appropriate people are punished accordingly. I do think that it's gone too far now, and this probably is the end of the line as far as we are concerned, and I think we've got to be prepared for whatever punishment UEFA or FIFA decide that we deserve. And I can't say really that we deserve to be treated lightly.
Just to bring you up to date with the position, the announcement that the game would take place came over the public address system, but it appears to have been an attempt to keep quiet in the stadium, which is now in a somewhat unreal calm, but there has not as yet been an official decision made by UEFA. So we still wait to know. One or two supporters at the far end, although in the stands they're very quiet. One or two supporters at the far end waving flags. The public address still appealing for calm and for patience. But we still have not heard officially from the governing body that the match will take place. One spectator prepared to take an extremely precarious position. The massed ranks of Liverpool supporters, and one remembers the piece which Bob Wilson did in Sports Night, in which Phil Neal, who had hoped to be the fourth captain to collect the European Cup here tonight, was saying that they being the team, owed everything to their supporters. And one can remember back to 1977 when the European Cup was first won, indeed the start of the domination of the event by Football League clubs, that supporters were allowed by Bob Paisley to join in the banquet afterwards. There was such a rapport between players and supporters, and nobody ever gave any thought that there would be any problems. But I think that maybe we've seen that the humour with which the Kop and Anfield was always associated has not quite been maintained in recent years. We never used to have chants there of obscene language, but we do now. And maybe one or two of that minority have been in the van of causing the problems here tonight. If you've just switched on and wonder why there's no football, it is that it's been impossible for the match to take place because of problems in the crowd, which resulted in the collapse of a wall because of pressure of people. There were a number of injured, and the latest report is that 28 people have lost their lives. 30th European Cup still waits to be covered by television around the world. 80 television stations were prepared to report this match, and instead they are reporting scenes which does nothing for the feelings of mankind, if I can put it that way. Still, there are expressions on people's faces that suggest something which is impossible to define, because they still want to get out and fight in spite of all the problems. One end of the ground now has great empty spaces, just litter on the terraces. People have moved away. The police still wait on guard on horseback and with their riot shields at the ready. These are Juventus supporters we are looking at the right end of the ground, and that gives an indication of the problem, because the division there was precisely the same division which at the other end of the ground allowed supporters of Liverpool to move into an area previously occupied by supporters of Juventus. I mean, it is no barrier of any sort, and it is surprising, to say the least, that with the record of problems caused by supporters coming from the United Kingdom, if not supporters from Liverpool, whose record up to now has been pretty well exemplary, it is surprising that there were no police on hand to make sure that the difficulties which occurred were not cut off right at the outset. But here are Italian supporters armed with pieces of wood, and gentleman on the right, if such I could call him, a stave. There is, as I said, a calm, but there is fear in that calm. Are we seeing the end of the problem? Debris all over the running track. Some just prepared to sit it out. Some with scarves around their faces as would-be bandits. Joe Fagan we saw go down the left of the main stand. I don't know whether he's gone again to appeal to supporters. But still, Jimmy, like you, we wait, and we wait with feelings of great sadness.
I expect you at home were as astonished as we are to see still aggressive actions there on the ground, even at this stage, even bearing in mind what has happened. But let's go to the newsroom, pick up the news from John Humphreys.
Well, it is still a very confused picture, and the only definite figure we have still on the number of dead is the 28 that we reported earlier from the Reuters news agency. It seems most of them died from crush injuries. They were trapped when a wall collapsed as some of the fans tried to invade the Juventus enclosure. Our reporter Wesley Kerr was within a few yards of that area, and he's just been on the telephone with this report.
The tragedy occurred about an hour before the match was due to begin, after scuffling between Juventus and Liverpool fans in the overcrowded stands. Suddenly, 6 feet in front of me, a wall collapsed. Many, many people must have died in that moment in the crush of masonry and people. But it was some time before the rescue services were called in. Astonishingly, the first people called onto the scene were riot police. At first, bodies were carried out on crowd control fences. It was 40 minutes before I saw a stretcher. I counted around 30 bodies myself. They were piled up beside the stadium.
Well, as Wesley Kerr said, the trouble started about an hour or so before the kick-off, when the Liverpool supporters, or some of them, broke out of their segregated enclosure and moved into the Juventus area and then onto the pitch. At one stage, there were thousands of them running riot on the terraces and on the field, and for a time at least the police did seem just about overwhelmed by the sheer pressure of numbers. The latest is that other news agencies and the ambulance service in Brussels have confirmed that it is at least 28 dead, and some ambulance officials say it could be as many as 50. One eyewitness, quoted by Belgian television a few minutes ago, said many of the victims were trampled underfoot. They weren't actually crushed by that wall collapsing. He said it was terrible. People were lying, dying on the stands before our eyes. At one stage, Juventus players came onto the pitch to try to calm supporters, and the Liverpool manager Joe Fagan went onto the terraces and tried to stop some of his supporters who were still fighting among themselves. We hope soon to be able to give you a telephone number to call for information on the dead and injured, and as soon as we do get that number, we'll bring it to you. But now, back to Jimmy Hill.
Well, thank you very much, John. And I suppose you wouldn't believe it, but people are ringing out for Scotland to say that we are using the word British supporters. On a night like this, I don't think anybody is scoring national points over one country or another. English, they come from Liverpool. Some of them may be Scots, some of them may be Welshmen, I don't know. But I don't really think that point is significant. It just is so sad. What do you think, Terry, could be the punishment, first of all, to Liverpool as a result of those supporters, and a knock-on effect to other British clubs and maybe even to England. What would your view be on that if they do decide to punish?
Well, it's a mammoth question, and obviously I wouldn't like to punish Liverpool because of they've behaved impeccably for years. I still say it's down to the individuals, and individuals should be punished. Why should all the good supporters be stopped? I feel that, and I will use the word British clubs, because I feel that we've all had problems over the years, and let's not hide from that fact. But I think that the main thing is the people that are responsible, they should be punished. I don't really feel the clubs. I feel a little bit sorry for the clubs that try to do everything they can. If everyone's satisfied that they've done everything they can, then they should. It's the individuals. If they're not satisfied they've done everything they can, then the club should be punished. But I don't think we should get carried away and say every club should be. And Liverpool's done this. Liverpool. What about all the good times and all the wonderful way they've behaved themselves?
No, I'm merely thinking of the way UEFA might view it. I'm not thinking of your particular view.
Well, I'm sorry. I thought you were talking about
Sorry.
mine. With UEFA, I think that they'll be hard. I think that they will put. I think they will certainly put English clubs out. I would criticise the whole of Britain, but I think the UEFA will do something with the English clubs.
All three English clubs, or more, there'll be 5 or 6 involved in Europe next season.
Yeah, well, I think they'll do something this time. Whether they'll just do it with Liverpool and use them as...
See, they might use Liverpool because Liverpool are the biggest name in European football. They might say, well, look, this is an example to anyone else who's going to step out of line. And I think, although Liverpool in the past have had a tremendous record, what's happened tonight ruins all that. And I think I'm inclined to agree with Terry. I think it could be, to say severe is an understatement. I think they could quite easily turn around and ban all English clubs in Europe for however long they feel.
What about the England team? I mean, how are people going to react to that? Because there was trouble last time in Finland, was there not?
Yeah, I think that really, as a consistent level, I think England have had more trouble than any of the actual club sides individually. I think that is even a bigger problem.
In other words,
and I think the main thing is that because it was said that it's such a popular sport, it's also such a popular media for publicity, and they know that this is the way they're going to get it. It's just we're dealing with animals and people with very small minds, and I do want to differentiate between those people that's causing that trouble and the good supporters. I know there's many of those also, like Graeme said earlier.
Yeah.
So I'm not trying to. Let's not, before people start saying we're brandishing everyone with the same. I'm not.
Well, we have some news, I think, from the stadium now, so let's go back and join Barry Davies.
Yes, Jimmy, the news from the stadium is that UEFA have decided that the match will take place. They've not told us yet when they anticipate the kick-off will be, but they have decided the match will take place, and I understand that the greatest factor in their decision was the crowd and the reaction that the crowd might take if the match was abandoned. They felt that it was much the best thing that the European Cup final should take place in spite of all the scenes that have preceded it. Still spectators wait. We've had 1 or 2 small fires from flags that were burned. Juventus so often seem to have their supporters in the shirts of their team, known as the Zebras, and that's the scene at the other end. The Liverpool supporters, and I think amongst that number there to the right, certainly there are true supporters who came to watch the game of football. They wait in the stands, where we've had the former manager of the French national team, Michel Ilago, has been up in the stand. Everybody's opinion has been asked as to why it happened and what could be done about it. David Lacey of The Guardian at the top of the picture there, one of the many journalists giving their story to London. David Miller of The Times in the centre of the picture. And journalists, Jeff Powell of the Daily Mail with a rather fuzzy hair. Journalists who, like the rest of us, have written and said many words on the problem of what has become known as football hooliganism, but which might more accurately be said to be hooliganism at football matches. And now they've got to find words again, as you in the studio and those of us looking down on this unhappy scene have been trying to do. Bear in mind that really it's over an hour that we've been looking at scenes like this, well over an hour. Still the police wait. If the paratroopers have been brought in, they're rightly conspicuous, although I suspect that gentleman with a berry might have something to do with that, but I'm only judging from the style of his headgear that they may well be outside the ground to try and prevent any further trouble, but that surely people who have watched what has happened here this evening, surely they cannot feel that they want to cause more concern. Some of the banners from Liverpool supporters, one doesn't mind the amusing banners against their great rivals Manchester United. One there that said Munich, which is a very different attitude to life. Of course, recalling the Manchester air crash that happened in Munich. How can you understand the mentality of somebody who wants to carry around a flag like that? And there have been other, not as bad flags, but words which do nothing to suggest they're real supporters, or indeed that they are part of the Liverpool scene. Members of the Juventus official party were down there, we were just looking at, helicopters flying overhead. It really resembles the scene at a battleground, which sadly it has been. Battle caused by a minority, which has led to, we still have a report of 28 deaths in a stadium that has as a backcloth that atomium that we're looking at, which was built for the World's Fair of 1958. It's supposed to represent the atom. People in a position to watch the sporting scenes from there in restaurants, and it is a quite marvellous view over a city where much of the goings-on of the European Economic Community take place, where decisions are made, and there will be great debate in the parliaments around Europe about what has happened here this evening. It's also, of course, the headquarters of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. But we came here with knowledge of that to watch two teams try out their sporting skills against each other on a football field. And this is what we've seen instead. Once again, members of the Red Cross always are on hand and always do such a marvellous job in such an unfussy and disciplined manner. They've had to sort out all the problems caused by an attempt by some people to get into an area which didn't belong to them. All around the commentary box, you might imagine, there are a number of conversations going on in many languages, relaying the story around the world. And it would seem that we have more riot police, and for sure the game will be played with riot police ringed all around the ground. And that will bring memories of a very long time ago, of Wembley in 1923, when the match was played with human walls. But what a different attitude amongst people was to be found then. And I think the delay has been, in fact, to give time for these reinforcements to come from the centre of Brussels to make sure that there will be no further problems at the stadium. And many of these will be working late into the night to ensure peace, and will be very happy when the other nationalities have departed the land of Belgium. All the police taking positions at the Liverpool end. Well, as you can imagine, in these circumstances, the place is rife with rumour. And there are now doubts being expressed as to whether or not the announcement that the game would go ahead was to allow time for the reinforcements to arrive. We can only update you as we are informed from our position in the middle of the stand. All the dignitaries from UEFA and the two clubs are out of sight, away from the position where they had expected to be taking their seats to watch the match. And great discussions must be going on there. Remembering that the Liverpool chairman, Mr. John Smith, is now the new chairman of the Sports Council, so has a position of great authority, and is a man of great authority. And we are now finding the ground is being slowly but surely encircled by riot police. And the latest information is that the match will go ahead, but they are waiting until the proper number of police are in the ground to assure that it can take place without further problem. I understand that there is now an emergency number for people to ring at home who may fear that they have somebody who might have been involved in injuries, and that number we will give you as soon as we possibly can. Campaigns. First victory in 1977 in Rome, as I said earlier, in very different circumstances. Although on a very similar evening as far as the weather is concerned. 1978, the trophy was retained again at Wembley. 1981, it was won in Paris, and last year in Rome after the first penalty competition, when Alan Kennedy scored the vital penalty. Kennedy, who's not included in the Liverpool team tonight, he's been out injured and his place has gone to Jim Beglin. And the cry "We'll never walk alone" begins to go up. A cry which has been given new feeling recently by the efforts of many singers to use that song to contribute to the disaster fund at Bradford. The ground now very quiet. Spectators just watching the police take their positions and waiting for the football match to take place. The match should have started just over an hour ago. Quiet at both ends of the ground. In fact, it's so quiet in the main stand now that one can hear the clatter of typewriters. Sports reporters once again, who came to a scene to report their stories for the back pages, finding instead they have to report a story which will go onto the front page. Still one or two throwing things at the police. It is quite unbelievable. So, I seem to have said it many times before, Jim, but it's still the case. Like you, we are waiting.
Well, two things really puzzling us here. One, how the players really are beginning to feel in the dressing rooms, and also how people can still be cheering if they are aware of the seriousness of the situation there tonight. Personally, I haven't got a cheer left in me, but let's pick up the latest news from the newsroom and John Humphreys.
Well, Jimmy, we now have the telephone number for those people to ring who are worried about friends and relatives in Brussels. The number is 010 32 25179 611. 010 322 517 9611. And I will repeat that number at the end of this news flash. It's the number of the central police station in Brussels. And we've just had a little more information about the nationalities of those who've been killed and injured. Brussels police said a minute or so ago it was a mixture of British, Italian and Belgian fans who were sitting in sections Y and Z. And the latest on the number of dead now stands at 35. And we've just had a statement from Downing Street. The Prime Minister, it says, has been following the television reports and shares what will be the universal horror at the scenes. She said, those responsible have brought shame and disgrace to their country and to football. Now, just to repeat that emergency number, it's 010 32 2517 9611. 010 322 517 9611. And we'll have more information for you in our main news bulletin. Now back to Jimmy Hill.
And of all the people in sadness about tonight, of course, the relatives and friends of those who are out there and those who may be involved have our deepest sympathy here from the studio in London tonight. There are reports that the Italians do not want to play the game, and I can well understand that. As I say, it's difficult enough to sit here and away from it all in some ways and still continue, let alone feel running around for 90 minutes. And I think the longer it goes on, Graeme, the less likely it is that players will want to
I think the players will know how serious it is now, Jim, I think. Obviously some parts of the crowd don't, because the last scenes we saw on the television there, they're still throwing things at the policemen. Now, they obviously have no idea that people have actually died. But I would think the players now know it. And I know the players personally, and there's no way they'll want to play it. Would you want to play in a game knowing that? I mean, it won't be the same game now. It wasn't the same game the minute people died, but certainly as far as spectacle on the pitch now, it just won't happen.
Interesting that the Prime Minister is watching this telecast and has expressed sympathy, but at the bottom of her mind, I think she will be even more determined, perhaps, Terry, to do something about it, and she has the opportunity after all.
I hope so.
I must say, not being political, because it's extremely difficult for us to have come in as some sort of experts on football. We're not too good at that at times, but you suddenly to be thrust into a sort of political hooligan discussion. But on the other hand, I just feel it's not only the present government, but I don't feel the House of Parliament generally. I read an article by Roy Hattersley which showed he'd no real grasp of the problem either. I don't think any of them have understood at the moment the damage that it has done, and but the difficulty that it will be in every department to get control of it.
Well, it amazes me if you say it doesn't know the extent of the problem, because it's gone on long enough and it's been bad enough.
It's over 20
I
years.
don't think it's this government's fault. I think we inherited the problem. But at the same time, things could have been done about it a lot long ago.
Yeah. No, without being party political, what I'm saying is I don't think that Westminster realises how difficult it is to get to grips with it and defeat it. How many very serious measures would have to be taken, which would bring tremendous protest from all the do-gooders and goody-goodies.
The amount of people who were, or amount of countries who were taking this game tonight, I think our government will now be forced into doing something really drastic, along with UEFA. because I think they said there was going to be 80 countries taking the game tonight. That's a lot of people, and I think a fairly strong opinion will be.
And I suppose we are a bit insular, really, broadcasting to the British nation and perhaps thinking of it. Thank you for reminding us that these pictures, instead of a football match, are going to 80 countries, which is even greater shame.
It's all, all the more embarrassing.
Well, do you think, I mean, it's asking all sorts of questions. I mean, is it possible to play a game of football, really, at this stage for the players?
I wouldn't want to play in a game, knowing that, I mean, if I was still there, playing for Liverpool, in the dressing room now, I wouldn't want to play again. I'm sure Terry wouldn't want to play either.
No, I think it's gone on too long now. I think it's got to be stopped.
So the players will have been buzzing. I don't know when this actually happened, maybe 20 minutes before the kick-off was due, but whenever the players will have been building themselves up ready for that. Now, after hearing the stories, they'll just be flat.
And it is a matter of adrenaline, you know, that is there at the time you want it and then disappears.
It's not important anymore. What's important now is the people who've died and the families who are now at home worrying about it. Because the same families will be in Italy as well. They'll be worrying too.
Yeah.
Well, it's 3 nations now, according to the news, who are involved in the death row. And so everybody will share the tragedy. We're in the middle of a Bradford City disaster fund. It's happening at Birmingham as well on the same day. We're trying to sort of digest that. And now an even worse story, and even worse pictures.
Looks like the fire
and again, you can see that the idiocy is continuing. That is the Juventus end. So it's not only us. It does seem as if from Italy there are people who have lost their sense of reason and perspective in life. It's fun and games, you see. I mean, that's one thing that I think will have to be understood, that it has become a way of life, and going to war on a Saturday has become fun and games for those people, and it provides almost like a drug or
a lot of it is organised. I mean, a lot of it is organised, whether that tonight was.
But apart from the organised side of it, Graeme, we've all seen the regular little bands that attach themselves to most clubs, and they do go for a barney and a bit of fun at the best end of it, but at the more serious end they go to do damage.
No, they don't go for a bit of fun. I mean, I've sat in trains talking to them, and I talk to them, and they don't even, I'm really serious, some of them don't even know some of the players' names. They're talking about fighting.
Look at this now. Look.
That's all they want to do, is fight, and it's something terrible that's become a problem for football.
What astonishes
me,
look at that. What astonishes me is that they are doing it in full view of the police, and the police really are accepting it, no?
Well, you don't know what the police have been told. Perhaps they might be saying if you get amongst it, it might make it even worse. Perhaps they're trying to say, let it simmer, let it die down, and you're getting 1 or 2 little incidents.
But what you were saying early on, look, he's actually doing his own bit of corporal punishment on that lad, and never mind the birch, he's administering it straight away, so there's one who is suffering somewhat.
That's right.
And I think the crowd are on the side.
To be fair to him, I mean, he was the one who was getting a stick off the...
No, but he started it himself. He was actually
fighting. There you go,
you see.
You start talking about who did what, and we're not sure. And that's the point, as I said before, was you're talking about it might be the wrong one, but
he's pleading his innocence now. But he was positively aggressive in the pictures before, Terry. There's no question about that.
Yes.
You see, and there's the vast majority just
waiting to
praying for a game of football.
Right.
Just praying for a game of football.
Maybe it'd be better if they got the game started and maybe take their minds off it. I mean, no, it's just... And look at them.
Apparently,
it's as if that's a no-go area for the police.
Phil Neal has come out of the dressing room, had a quick look round the terraces and gone back in, maybe to assess the situation. You see, if the police have no control, of course, there may come a point, if they're that violent, where the players are in danger. I mean, if reason has gone out of the window entirely and the police haven't got control, you see that the policy of the police seems to be containment there rather than arrest or punishment. Does it not?
That's right.
Now, I can't understand that, because it wouldn't happen in Spain, Terry, would it? They would be in among them, sort the lot out, and they'd be in vans off to prison.
That's right. that is... But there, I mean, straight away, I mean...
Hang on, look.
Yeah, they just let them do what they
You
want.
see, why are they allowing them to do that? There are enough police there to capture at least those 3 or 4 and take them away.
They're Italian.
Yeah, I know they're Italians, but I mean, whoever they are, there's a total disregard for law and order of any kind, with a death roll at the moment, as we understand, standing at 35.
Well, it doesn't look like they're going to do anything about it, so it's not as a matter of taking the trouble areas away and then getting on with the game. They're waiting for it to fizzle down, and it's just not going to, by the looks of it there.
Yeah. You see, well, they didn't suddenly come there and paint that on. They came there with that provocative banner without any doubt. And it's so, you know, while they're looking to Liverpool supporters, who obviously, many of whom, not supporters, shall we say, but Liverpool's followers, who are guilty, there's no question that Juventus fans too have a touch of the hooligan brush. Because that's provocative. That's not a peaceful banner in any sense.
That's right.
But we said that at the beginning, I mean, it's a minority and...
Look at that, I mean, it's still, you couldn't wish for a more peaceful area, could you, than that?
And it's unfortunate, because they'll be mixed up with Italians. And,
yes.
I mean,
The business of the masks, again, is to be able to get away with it. You know, in other words, as you say, like, or Barry mentioned the word bandits or whatever, but again, to disguise their faces so that they can't be recognised because they want to go in and do the damage, and then get off scot-free.
They're doing Liverpool's cause a big favour there by showing that flag, because it obviously proves it's not down to Liverpool, or solely Liverpool.
Well, it is an extremely sad situation, and at the moment it does look as if, more than anything else, a decision of some kind is necessary. I don't think it's in anyone's interest just to keep the thing going for this length of time.
And you certainly don't want to really see this, because this is all that is promoting other people to want to do the same sort of thing.
Yeah.
Yeah, there'll be people sitting at home thinking this is great viewing.
I cannot understand how it is that they are allowed to get away with that in such small groups. But there you are. Perhaps we will have some information from various police forces throughout the world as to why that can happen, why they are allowed to get away with it and abuse society in that particular way. I know...
And it must be terrible for the people wearing their colours that have behaved. You know, we feel bad enough here, but to actually be there, wearing your colours, knowing what's happened, I mean, that must be a very, very sad thing.
Last year in Rome, after the game, the Liverpool supporters had a terrible time of the supporters of Rome and the police in Rome, and you just wonder, you know, if we've gone there this time, they're nearly going to say something, I think.
So it's not only a British problem, although you say, I mean, does it happen in Italy regularly, or does it not? Yes, you can see Phil Neal there. Well, you probably heard the voice of Phil Neal there, and you can see the police are taking action at last, but for news of that announcement and what it may mean for the rest of the evening, let's join Barry again.
Well, here is Gaetano Scirea, the captain of Juventus, making a similar announcement to that of Phil Neal. And and applauded at both ends of the ground, and saying in his own language the same as Phil Neal had said: we want to play for you, we want to perform, stop behaving as you're behaving, and we will come out to play. But sadly, the problem which started at the left-hand end is now getting a reply at the right-hand end, when we are seeing nothing more or less than street fighting. Fighting between young supporters from Italy, although some of them have Liverpool scarves, who are baiting the police. I must say that both Shearer and Phil Neal deserving of great credit. Very simple expression by the Liverpool captain. And I know the players will be absolutely sickened by what is happening. The implications for the future of their club and for the game will certainly not be lost upon them. But these disturbances have now been going on for 2 hours. And it seems, as you were saying, Jimmy, that the police are ill-prepared to take positive action for fear of starting a reaction at one end to what's happening at the other. Phil again making his way around as one of the Liverpool supporters, at least in Liverpool colours, is carried away or helped away by men from the St John's ambulance. The police, understandably, are preventing movement from anywhere in the ground. It's impossible to dispatch anybody to the dressing room area to find out or to get official words from either the two teams or from UEFA. But I do understand that the Italians had initially refused to play and were persuaded that maybe playing was the only way of bringing to an end this ugly situation. It will ask a lot of them. But difficult as though it will be for them. I think it would be the right decision, even after all this time. There has to be something to take the mind away from the scenes that have happened. But you can understand that they may well feel that they are personally at risk on the field. As indeed, I suppose it has to be said, as anybody in the ground, to the sort of mentality which is prepared to react in the way we are now watching. I mean, it is people just taking full advantage of the situation. Whether their motivation is totally hooliganism or whether it is inspired by a more frightening backdrop. Again, the St John's ambulance men to the rescue. I can only assume that this was caused by a missile being thrown from the crowd. Another announcement being made in Italian. And it's actually to the Italians that the words of reprimand and rule now apply. Obviously senior members of the Belgian police force here. But things are totally quiet at the left-hand end, which is now totally Liverpool end. There isn't a Juventus supporter in sight at that end. And the